Taoiseach, Mary Donovan, Mary Dunleavy-Green, Maris Patton O'Connell and Miriam Moriarty were forced to go on hunger strike for 51 days and nights outside this building in attempt for justice from September the 21st until November the 10th, sleeping on the streets outside here in appalling conditions, appalling weather. Their meagre possessions were stolen in what's supposed to be safe Dublin, and they did it to represent the other survivors. I had the privilege of supporting them by raising their case in this House at the beginning of November last. And during my contribution, I pleaded with you to go out, Taoiseach, and meet the hunger strikers and to agree with their reasonable demands. The survivors have been deeply traumatised by institutional abuse they suffered, and they were re-traumatised by government's lack of engagement and response. And then they faced the psychological and health issues following their hunger strike. Their courage, strength and sacrifice in undertaking a hunger strike was not for themselves alone, but for all survivors. They undertook the protest not just for them, but for the 4,000 survivors of residential institutional abuse. And their demands were simple: a state contributory pension to acknowledge the years of unpaid labour carried out in institution where children were forced to work without remuneration, education or protection, and a Health Amendment Act card to help address the lifelong consequences of the abuse they suffered in these industrial and reformatory schools. While Taoiseach, your apology is very welcome, survivors have experienced decades of lip service. Successive governments have recognised the wrongs while failing to implement comprehensive survivor-centred solutions. Trust in government and the powers that be have been eroded by decades of inaction. Only decisive action can now change this. The Support for Survivors of Residential Institutional Abuse Act 2025 was introduced by this government. The Act is a half measure that ignores the needs of survivors. We, Sinn Féin, brought forward amendments to this legislation that sought to make the bill equal for all survivors, but they were struck down by this government. Our amendments included a universal health card, contributory state pension, educational bursaries, religious orders financial contribution and equal access to all supports under the Act, regardless of whether survivors had received an award or settlement. That's the very least that survivors should expect. Significant concerns remain that the legislation is incomplete and does not fully address the lived realities of survivors of institutional abuse. The state continues to shield religious orders from their financial responsibility. It's unacceptable that the state alone should foot the bill for crimes committed by both church and state. Justice delayed has already been justice denied. For survivors of institutional abuse, immediate and decisive action must follow tonight's apology to make it valid.